started the program with prayer, we need not have a second prayer. Now, yesterday, the Purusha was tied down very tight by the Devas, and he was placed as the beast of offering, beast of sacrifice. That is where he stands since 24 hours. Now, they have arranged the whole apparatus in such a way that they tied him down with 7 layers. In 7 layers, they made him a bundle, and they wanted to make a fire offering, a holocaust, with the aid of 3 times 7, that is 21 sticks of firewood or fuel. That is where he stands. You will see how he is tied and what are the 7 layers. We know what is the physical layer, because we know very well our physical body and the matter in it and the physical matter around us. So the first layer is what we call the physical or the material. The next layer is the subtle material, this subtle body which we call, which makes the fabric of the physical matter. It is called the astral. Between two, we find the network and the fabric of what we are going to explain this evening as the etheric body. But these are the layers in the making of the universe and also in the making of the microcosmos. The mental layer, that is what we call the mind. Buddhic or the will or the creative aspect, with the help of which the creator creates. In it we have what we call the soul, which is made up of the 5th or the nirvanic plane. Of course, there are many types of terminology used by different masters for their respective disciples. But this is according to the ancient Buddhistic scientific terminology of the ancient Trans-Himalayan and Tibetan nomenclature. Those great ones whom the disciples call the yellow caps. That is, the glorious Buddhistic teachers who had the yellow caps as their symbols or uniform to differentiate themselves from the red caps. That is, the black magicians in the false name of Buddhism. There were fake aspects of Buddhism from which the wise ones had to save the original aspects. For every good thing, there will be a counterfeit. The more valuable the good thing is, the more often you will find the counterfeit. So, they had to cut out the true wisdom, and therefore they called themselves the yellow caps. I think you know, for the first time, the Tibetan teacher, whom we call Master Jwalkor, he was asked for more than 320 years to be the abbot of 3 lamsaries of yellow cap disciples. In 2 different physical bodies, through 2 different rebirths, he worked as the master of the same 3 lamsaries. And in the 3rd physical body, which was first known by Madame Blavatsky, he was working as the one Jwalkor whom we hear now, and the one who dictated the majority of the passages in the pages of the secret letter. We are back. You see, that is something different but a little bit interesting. We had a diversion. Now moving. Since he had to give the training to the disciples of 3 lamsaries of the yellow caps, he had to give the same wisdom in 3 different terminologies and nomenclatures. In the Buddhistic lamsaries, 3 lamsaries, he used one terminology. And at the same time, just when he made a contact with Alice A. Bailey for 30 years work for the first time, he was very busy physically in one world and on the higher planes in the other world, which we know the preparation of the volumes through Alice Bailey. Physically, he was working in a Western body, and in the Second World War, he took part in the war. And while doing so, when he was sleeping in the borders between the German area and the French-speaking area, during his sleep hours, he worked in the Himalayan region in the lamsaries. So he had a 24 hours schedule. Of course, this was not the first time for him to do like that. He was trained to do so as early as 5,000 years ago. And we have an account of how he had his first training with his two gurus, Master Moria and Master Kuthumi, who were then called 5,000 years ago Maru and Devapi, whose names you will find in the secret doctrine. And also you find these two names in all the Puranas in Sanskrit, including Mahabharata and Bhagavata and Vishnu Purana. You will know two great ones, the names of two great ones, Maru and Devapi, who were training this young fellow. Then he was a little funny young fellow who was being trained. And during daytime, he was asked to stay there in the ashram, an ashram of materialistic and rationalistic paths, where materialism was taught and spiritualism was condemned totally, and where free food, drink and sex were trained and encouraged into. That center was there, established in the northwest of the Himalayas, which we now call Kandahar, Kabul, Kandahar, etc. It may be of some interest that about that period and the details how they were worked out. I wrote a dramatic type of novel of the whole training he received. Till now, of course, I had no time to translate it into English. I wrote it in my regional language, and for the past 10 years, it is a very, very popular reading novel among our people in the South India. Now, this is...
May I remember, we not yet got the translation of the stanza 7.
Pardon?
We not yet got the translation to English
Yes.
of the stanza 7.
Stanza 7, yes,
Yes.
we had.
No.
Not the English.
No, we had not the English translation.
Not the English.
Not English translation,
No.
yes, I'll tell you. And the terminology we are going to use belongs to Master Jwalkul, as he used in teaching Blavatsky and Alice Gabriel. But he taught the same thing in some other terminology and language to some other schools. But let us be consistent enough to follow the terminology which we find in the Alice Bailey's works, because it is easy for us to follow one way of using terms, technical terms. So, you please take down the English translation if I have not given it.
No.
7 are the layers. 7 are the layers. And 3 times 7. 3 times 7 are the sticks of fuel. Are the sticks of fuel. Please tell me if my pronunciation is bad. I'll repeat. Prepared for this Purusha. Prepared for this Purusha. Full stop. Next sentence. Since the Devas are engaged, in multiplying the yajna, You know the word yajna. We use it many times. Yajna. They tied the Purusha. They tied. They tied the Purusha tight. Like that. They tied the Purusha tight. As the beast of sacrifice. As the beast of sacrifice. This is the English translation of this stanza.
Thank you.
See what the Devas did. So for this, he was tied in this manner with 7 layers of bandage. So the next is the nirvanic, what we call the nirvanic plane. The next paranirvanic plane. And the next one, 7. Mahaparanirvanic plane. Mahaparanirvanic plane. It is also good to use this terminology because if this was the terminology originally used by Gautama the Buddha when he taught to his disciples first. So, the yellow caps followed the original terminology showered upon mankind by Gautama the Buddha. So, Master Jwalkur also followed the same thing. In Buddhism also we have many types of terminologies, but they lead to confusion. Because in the name of Buddhism, there is much nonsense played afterwards as counterfeit. But pure Buddhism remained different from everything. And where is the Purusha? Then this is the bandage.
In the middle point.
Yes. In the middle point, what is it? It is only a hollow.
The monad.
The hollow, the same thing there. And here we called the space unbound as the Shiva aspect. Also by Master Jwalkur when he transmitted it to Blavatsky and elsewhere. So you can study the books of Alice Bailey, verifying this terminology with it. It will be easy for you. That's why I am just sticking up to the terminology of the Master. Shiva aspect, that is unbound, or we can call it before creation, and also after the end of the previous creation. There is a gap in between. So the previous day, the shops were closed by 7:30 in the evening. The next morning, the shops were opened by 9:30. In between, there is the gap. Nobody was present. But Because of the conferences, the IPS are present everywhere. Similarly, in the gap, also some great devas are working, who are called the musical devas or Gandharvas.
That's what we translated this morning.
Yes. They are working throughout the night for those who are sleeping, because as they get up, these devas who sleep in the night, by the moment they get up, they want some bread, toast and coffee. Therefore, they were preparing it. Now, there is the Shiva aspect. It is also symbolically called the cremation ground in the scriptures. When you study Indian scriptures, it is described that Shiva takes his abode in the cremation ground or the burial ground, cemetery. Why? That means when everything goes into the subjective, that is what is called Shiva. That's why you find that Shiva having skulls with him and bones in the pictures, symbolic of the cremation ground and the cemetery. It's all symbolic. There are neither bones nor skulls. Shiva aspect. And from that we have the existence aspect. Otherwise, these things cannot exist. How they exist, do you know? They exist in the equilibrium of the millions of forces that manifest, and they are at work. Just as a tent, the shape of a tent stands by the equilibrium of the pulling forces of the ropes in many directions. The whole creation exists in equilibrium of the millions and millions of forces. That's why the whole creation is compared with a soap bubble. In the scriptures, one creation is called one unit of bubble. See how the soap bubble exists as the equilibrium of the inside air and the outside air and the thin layer exists. That's why in the scriptures they compare it with a bubble. So, there is the existence aspect, which we call the Lord of Pervation or Vishnu. Also in the language of the Master Tibetan. And then, by virtue of the existence aspect, the Purusha is tied down in the layers of the egg as the four-faced creator. So inside Purusha, we have what is called the four-faced or the Brahma aspect. You have to refer to one of the books of Jwal at least 5 or 6 times about these things so that they stand in your mind. Just take down the book and then you consult one of the books of the master. Preferably Treatise on Cosmic Fire, because it contains the total wisdom and the formulae of all what he taught to his disciples. Jal. Of course, the secret doctrine also contains it, but it is a very, very big book unveiled, so that the modern people may not find time to finish it.
But there are a lot of texts out of the secret doctrine also in the cosmic fire.
Yes, in the cosmic fire, more often, too frequently, the required passages from the secret doctrine are being quoted. So, we have the threefold aspect of Godhead. That is, Shiva aspect, the background existence, who exists beyond creation. When there is no creation, he exists. This is called the absolute state. And what we call the Mahaparinirvana is nothing but that state experienced. Because the hollow contains the same space in the barrel as the space outside the barrel. Suppose you have a barrel, a pipe, a hollow pipe. What does the hollow contain? The same thing as that is outside the pipe. Similarly, what we call ourselves or the I am in us is nothing but the content of the barrel, the hollow. To our tiny senses, it is hollow. To itself, it is everything. So, to our understanding, it is zero or negative zero. To itself, it is all or Purnam or positive zero. So, we have the threefold aspect. This threefold aspect also, if we add, it will be what is described as the development of the Purusha through 10 digits described previously. In the second stanza, it is described that the Purusha expanded by 10 digits through 1/4 or quarters. So, each of these should be familiarized, and then we can have a capability of editing these things being produced through our buddhic plane. Because this is not a plane of understanding, but this is something, a plane of synthesis. The more we get familiarized with the details, the more we will be able to understand the totality. It is not a matter of learning or memorizing, but it's a matter of getting familiar. It is different. Suppose I see Rudolph for the first time. With the naked eye, I see. With my spectacles, I see him better. With a telescope, I see front, back, etc. And with a microscope, I see his skin pores and hairs. That means I have seen much more than what you have seen. But suppose you know him for the past 10 years, and I have seen just now, even with the microscope. What is the difference? You know him, I don't know him. Because I have seen him for the first time. Even though I see through the microscope, I cannot know him. I have seen much detail of what you call Rudolph, but since you know him for the past 10 years, that is what is called knowing him. What is it that we call familiarity? If I say I know him, that means I have some familiarity with him, not that I have microscoped his skin and hair. Knowing is not the anatomy of any subject, but it is the physiology of some subject, and it is the biology, flesh and blood of some subject. So, we should get familiarized with each of these concepts. Another example I will give you. If we give a piece of cloth in a tailor's shop, and the next day, if we go there, we will see little pieces cut separately. We asked him to make a coat, but now we see only little pieces, not the coat. Unless we learn tailoring in his shop, we can't know which piece belongs to which part of the coat until he edits all these parts into coat. So we are now dealing with the pieces of the Purusha. So these are the 10. When arranged in a representative way, the first is called the triangle on the top, having the triune Godhead, Shiva, Vishnu and the Brahma aspect. And then into the world, it gives the Mahaparinirvanic plane. In its succession, from this side, you will get all those. The descent is like that. And then the sixth, the Parinirvanic plane. And then the fifth, the Nirvanic plane. So on, up to the physical. So, first, they invited him into the triangle. Poor fellow, he came there. And then they tied him down in 7 layers. Unless it is described in such a story form, we cannot have a comprehension. Intellectual approach is no solution. We have many such stories in the scriptures, Puranas, about the solar god also, the sun coming down into sun's rays and creation, losing his luminosity when he comes to earth. Beautiful stories. It was said that one Deva, who was the Deva of farm, had 360 daughters. And he gave all his daughters in marriage to the sun god, this fellow, and sent the daughters with him to his city. And the daughters returned weeping. They said, "He is too hot, he is a fire. We can't approach," they said. Then the father-in-law invited the son-in-law to his house for a festival. You see, and he called a barber to his house and asked him to shave everything of the head of this sun god except 7 little hairs on his head. And then the barber has shaved everything and left only the skin of the head except 7 little hairs. Then the daughter said, "Oh, he's beautiful, we can approach him." And then they had children from him, and that is what we call the planets and the children of the planets. That is the story. Like this, we have many stories about creation. He was deceived by the father-in-law and got shaved. Now here, this is the story. You know how they made it a bandage? They have made it round like this, the whole thing, these 7 layers. one after another, like this. And there he lies, inside. From him these fellows are born, and these fellows have contrived, intrigued, and they have tied him inside. That is 7 layers. And there is another thing, 3 times 7, 12 is sticks, that is 21 sticks. We will see what it is also. You know, also from Shalpul's teachings, that each of these 7 layers have 7 subdivisions. For example, the physical has the physical, the physical buddhic, the physical nirvanic, paranirvanic, mahaparanirvanic.
And is this the cosmic physical plane?
This we can call the cosmic physical,
Yes.
not Shiva.
No.
Vishnu aspect is cosmic physical,
Yeah.
and Brahma aspect is the denser half of the cosmic physical. Denser. Or it is also called, the Brahma aspect is also called the lotus of Vishnu aspect. That is, the pattern of the petals of the bud are unfolding into creation. That's why in the scriptures it is described, Vishnu was lying on his bed made up of the folds of a very, very, very big serpent called eternity. And from the navel of Vishnu you will find a lotus, and in the lotus you will find a little child with 4 heads. Now, each is divided into 7. Not only that, if you start with the second subdivision, leaving the first subdivision. For example, in the physical, if you take the physical and divide it into so here the physical plane ends. Then starts the second astral plane. But if you take this as the first,
Etheric.
then you will get the astral first as the 7th of this division. Of course, just note down and then afterwards go into the works of Jalko. Because Rome is not built in a day. So you have another temporary plane worked out by the Devas. You can call this TP1, temporary plane 1. And then you take the third as the first. You have the second subplane of the astral as the 7th. And you can call this TP2, temporary subplane 2, temporary plane 2. This is the matrix or the network of the web of solar systems. This is how the solar systems contain their own texture of existence. If you calculate like this, you will have 49 subplanes in all, and 49 minus 7, that is 42 TP, that is temporary planes. These planes you will find 42 because 17 is eliminated as common factor. They are 91 in all, working as the bets of the Deva kingdom. And the remaining 9 out of 100 are called the cities of illusion in the same Rigveda. That is what we call the form aspect of the physical existence.
Therefore, Advaita says that the physical body is no principle.
Yes, physical body is no entity at all because it is only the resultant or the ultimate of the previous layers. Just as the tent is not a separate item. If you count all the items in a tent, you have the poles, the ropes, and the cloth, and the nails. But if you count all these things, you don't have another thing as the tent. The tent is only the total effect of all these. Similarly, what we call physical matter or our physical body is not an entity, and it is not an existence itself. It is the resultant or the ultimate of the upper existences. That's why it is called a bubble. Because bubble is neither air nor soap. There are only two items, the soap and the air, but the bubble is the third thing which is neither. So this is called, the remaining 9, there are principles. They are called the cities of illusion. There is also a little story in the same Rigveda describing the splendors of the conquests of the Lord of Purusha, Vishnu. You see, there was a big giant called Giant of Illusion. The story goes like this. And he built a fortress for himself. And he stood in the fortress and began to fight the Lord of Purusha with his densest matter and form, which are illusions. Then the Devas tried to fight him out. They could not, because they are all involved in the forms and the matters of the material. Since they became parts of this giant, they could not fight. Then the Lord came down with his weapon as himself, that is the I am, number 1, and hit the fellow like a lightning. Then his fortress crumbled, and there is only the Lord and his space once again. This is a peculiar story described in one of the hymns of Rigveda called Vishnu hymn. And then this fellow tried a second time, built a fortress 10 times powerful, and wanted to fight him. And then the same fellow without any weapons came down as I am and hit them. And these two fortresses are gone, and only the fellow remained with his creation made twice or 2 zeros. And then this fellow built a fortress of 999 times stronger. Then the same fellow without weapons jumped and is crumbled, and there was only the fellow and zeros. Of course, it is an esoteric story which involves many wonderful principles in it. And they have made this fellow exist
three main divisions.